But we're going to start today with our keynote, talking about personalization at scale. Long before the COVID crisis, Pepsi brands have already been in the process of migrating their video planning and buying towards a more data-driven and more targeted and a digital approach. That need for greater flexibility in planning across new and old channels became critically important in the last months. Kate Brady is the head of media innovation and partnership development at PepsiCo North America. She's been at the head of that charge. We want to talk to her today about how they hope to achieve personalization at scale for their video programs. So Kate, welcome, come on in. There you are, hi Kate.
There I am, hi Steve, nice to be here.
Where are we finding you today?
I am also in Westchester, much like Lisa. I'm in northern Westchester. I'm probably about an hour south of Mohawk, where you had that previous summit, and about an hour north of the city.
Oh man, I miss Mohawk. Mohawk, especially in the fall, was absolutely gorgeous. We hope to go back.
Yeah.
So let's start by talking about, I know that Pepsi has been in the process of a migration of its budget, of its planning, and also its use of data. So why don't you give us the broad strokes here? What is the path you already had been on before the COVID crisis hit?
Yeah, Steve, so for the past few years, we've actually been on this journey, shifting from just so much reliance on our traditional linear channels to more digitally native channels. We pride ourselves in being very consumer centric in everything we do. And so with that, we try and have a video neutral approach to our media allocation, really being about where the message is going to resonate most with that consumer. And so it's been clear for some time that our consumers were migrating away from those traditional linear video to more digitally native, as mentioned. You know, the population of cord cutters and cord nevers continues to climb, and that trend has only accelerated and really exploded to the OTT space as through COVID over the past few months. And so we're seeing the percentage shifts to that space at numbers that we thought were going to take several years to get to. So it's just put further confidence that we've been on the right path. And I think that we're just going to continue to see that migration.
Has there been, you have a large portfolio of multiple brands in PepsiCo. Is this happening, do you see this happening equally across the brands, or are there some brands for which it's happening faster and slower?
That's a good question. You know, we have over $20 billion brands within our portfolio. And, you know, so many different brands people don't even realize are a part of PepsiCo. And I would say that all of our brands are migrating this way. Some of the smaller brands that tended to be more digitally focused from the get-go might have that greater percentage than some of the larger brands that still have a heavy reliance on some linear platforms because of our sports contracts and some of our major event tentpole type of sponsorships that we have. But I would say across the board, we are consciously making this shift. Our goal is really to be as addressable with our messaging as possible. So this helps us on that journey.
So what are the alternate channels that you've been leaning into most heavily? Is it OTT? Is it particular flavors of OTT? Is it YouTube? Is it Instagram? Is it Facebook? What are the places where you're seeing most of this money migrate to?
Yeah, we've been strong investors within all of the social players for many years now across our portfolio business. But I would say from an OTT and streaming side of things, I think our easiest migration has been to the major holding companies, FUP and OTT services. I think that's been the easiest way for us to make that shift, just because we've got investments there and it helps us optimize within our investments across the portfolio. But we're a very data-driven company and historically have seen such strong performance in linear. So having the data points as we do make those migrations to constantly monitor and measure what we're doing so that we have the right data to support continued shifts as we go. And we know intuitively that it makes sense because we see the data going there, or the trends going there, but having the support from the measurement on the back end is really critical in everything that we do. And so I would say when we started, it's probably with those biggest holding companies, but we're testing and piloting across the board, across a number of different smaller platforms as well.
I know we're going to get to some of that testing that you're doing in a second, and I want to talk about the data piece later as well. But what I know that part of the plan here was to optimize towards flexibility. That flexibility was key, and of course that's the watchword this year, is that everybody's learned that flexibility is critical, and we're going to be talking about that for the next few days. But what have you really learned about trying to build a system where flexibility is baked in? where you're able to pivot quickly?
You're 100% right that flexibility is one of the top 3 buzzwords we've seen, I think, this year. And just like many other advertisers, it was a critical insight that we garnered as we went into the challenges with COVID, and continues to be so important to have that flexibility with our investments. So like several other advertisers, we had a substantial amount of our investments dedicated to upfront commitments through Q2 and Q3 when we started off this year. And we've always benefited from the efficiencies of upfront, but having such a large portion of our budget locked down proved to be a challenge as we were going through the year. And so as we approached this year's upfronts, we had 3 really specific mandates as we negotiated with our partners. And those included having greater flexibility as really the #1 priority within all of our investments, having greater control over the investments, and ensuring that we're future-proofing our business and everything that we do. And that means ensuring that we've got innovation built into our channels. Our agency did a phenomenal job negotiating with our partners to ensure that we had increased flexibility. But we also recognize that just by shifting more of our mix into digitally native platforms, that always offers more flexibility from the get-go. Just the way that the buying process works, it's always provided a little bit more flexibility than the traditional platforms, with the ability to optimize throughout, and just the way that you go to market. And so from an optimization perspective, we can optimize throughout based on creative performance or engagement metrics, or best through sales data that we can garner. And as we look to be more personalized and addressable with our media allocations, this flowed naturally through with our evolving strategy. So it really all just worked out to make sense that shifting from more traditional based to more digitally native did twofold. It helped us deliver on our strategy of being more addressable in nature and personalized in nature, but it also offered that flexibility that we were craving so much.
Did you have to do anything internally, or you learn anything about making changes internally so you could take advantage of that flexibility, so you really could turn things around quickly, respond quickly to changing circumstances? What does it take to do that internally? Because Pepsi is a pretty big ship.
Oh, we are a huge ship. So my team, or the broader team that I sit in, is our North American media and data team. And we have a massive group of such smart and talented people and our group itself is only, I think it's 18 months old within the entire PepsiCo organization. But in that 18-month time, we're responsible, our broader, it's definitely not just me, is responsible for driving the significant change in how we really market to our consumers, by building this direct, dynamic, and intimate one-to-one relationships with billions of people globally. We're making our brands more indispensable and driving performance for PepsiCo as a whole. And at the core of this is really our CDNA. Our CDNA is our industry-leading PepsiCo-owned, fully addressable consumer database ecosystem. It's built across first, second, and third-party data assets that allows us to see a full 360 view of our consumers. And we have profiles across all of the different brands that we have. And as you mentioned, we have a lot of brands.
What are those key data points that drive that? And where did you get that data?
Yeah, so it's a collection of, like I said, it's first, second, and third party data assets. It's really looking at about 110 million households across the US, where we understand purchasing data with additional attributes that are laying. So if my colleague who really runs this team says, if you think about a big Excel sheet and you've got all of your households and then the attributes across, and so we're really filling in the holes and trying to really make it the most holistic, strongest database, so that we really have the best tools to ensure that as we're delivering our messages to our consumers, they're the right messages that they're going to resonate most with them and be most effective towards them. Because ultimately we want to make it a great experience for our consumers as we're talking to them. And so this CDNA audience profile, it drives more consumer centricity and enables more effective marketing and targeted media buying and activations. In addition to that, this broader team that I'm a part of has built this ROI engine, which is a phenomenal platform that enables faster, detailed, more accurate omnichannel ROI measurements in short and long term. And we know that's always been a challenge for us, is just the lag of getting the measurement on the back end. So having that built in-house is really going to be game changing as we proceed. And then Canvas is another tool that we're really excited about internally, that another section of our team is built out. And this really enables us to quickly democratize complex analytic decisioning and machine learning models into really simple, easy to use, end-to-end informed marketing ecosystems, so that our marketers have all of the aspects that they need at their fingertips to really drive the most effective marketing across the board. So all of these actions, when we think about them, like, are going to drive increased ROI from both marketing effectiveness and granular decision making, reduce costs through increased in-housing because we're owning a lot of this work of both products and services, and driving this culture of performance marketing within PepsiCo. So building these capabilities is really a key priority for us, so that we can own that end-to-end media process from ideation all the way to execution and media buying. And it's enabling us to truly complement our supply and delivery strengths with equally powerful demand generation capabilities. So I'm really excited to see how what we've done over the short term and what we're going to do in the future. This started off in North America, but we're expected to be in building these capabilities in roughly 15 different new markets by the end of 2021.
Well, what you just said raises at least 15 other questions about in-housing, how much is being allocated to, how much your agencies are doing. But how about we talk out of an example let's talk about an example of something you've executed, say, now or in recent months that maybe you never would have been able to dream of executing 12, 15 months ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a performance perspective, I think just thinking about our e-com teams and the capabilities that they've been able to build and really transact on over the past few months, I think our business as a whole was not traditionally very e-com focused, but we've seen, and I think in light of COVID has really helped accelerate that process as well. But we've got a team of dedicated team members that are really hands-on keyboards, driving the messaging, leveraging our database to make sure that they're optimizing in real time and getting the right message out there, so that our customers have the products that they love, and we're delivering the smiles that are really at the core of everything that we're doing.
Well, how does performance work in a company where brand advertising really had been the driver for everything? So what place? I mean, and clearly you're not selling all your Pepsi products direct to consumers. So explain a little bit more about what performance means within the context of a set of Pepsi brands that typically are really doing sort of much more brand oriented kind of messaging.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we still are very heavily reliant on brand focused, and I think we're increasing our amount in performance marketing as we proceed. And I think it's more about being tailored with the message that we know the consumers are going to respond to. And we do a lot of measurement to understand from brand attributes, what's driving purchase intent, what's driving brand I love, what's driving those metrics. And if we can refine our messages and make sure that our creative is delivering to driving those metrics, that's also benefit from a performance perspective. And ultimately that drives to sales as well. So
you're using store level data to help tie all this together to understand the better ROI.
As often as we can, yeah.
Now, I know we in prepping this, you mentioned a term that interests me: personalization at scale. That's one of the goals here. Tell me what that really looks like, personalization at scale, especially when we're talking about the vast amounts of media that you guys are buying across a lot of big video channels.
Yeah, personalization at scale is a huge priority across, I would say, almost every one of our sectors, and our sectors being our different business units. I think, again, at the core of that, if wherever we can leverage our CDNA audience to help drive that personalized message and help really make us smarter about what are going to be the best ways to market to our consumers, we think about it in a number of different ways, whether that can be from video messaging, from price point messaging, from geo-targeted efforts. Even when you think about COVID and the way that the different regions opened up differently, we needed to have different messages for those appropriate openings, and making sure that we were communicating to people that the way they wanted to be communicated to, that was in the right tone. And so we're taking all of the data that we have to be as prescriptive in those messages as possible, because it's really important that we make those one-to-one connections as we move forward to kind of build that loyalty amongst our fans. we
Is there a good example of, you know, of some of ways in which you were able actually to leverage all that data in a personalized way?
We're in the process of doing a number of campaigns right now that are leveraging some of our team data along with our product efforts to really deliver specific affiliations to be more. We've done some work with price point or customer tie-ins so that we can really help drive specific efforts with specific customers across our portfolio. We've done some things where we've paired specific messages to deliver the right message to that audience. From a gaming perspective, we've done a pilot where we've specifically dynamically delivered specific messaging to those audiences, which we know, and we had a portfolio that we were working from and delivered those specific messages based on the attributes that we knew would resonate best with them. And all of that helps us learn to be more effective in different channels that we know are important for us.
So I know that one of the things that you're also, and it also is a part of this, is the lab. Why don't you explain to us what the lab is at Pepsi, how it works, and then we'll talk about some of the ways in which you're trying to use it.
Yeah, so when we were talking previously, and part of the work on the personalization at scale, we've got almost, I think it's 4 pilots we're hoping to initiate over the next quarter or 2 with our PepsiCo Labs team. And our PepsiCo Labs team is an amazing team based out of Tel Aviv in Israel. They've got extensions, a team member in San Francisco, a team member in London, and we work with them very closely, my team. They're our global digital tech venturing arm, and they have really deep relationships with the VC and startup communities around the globe. They're a very small team, but they've got a phenomenal process on how to identify and then rapidly pilot startups to help address business challenges that we've identified. I partnered with them over the past year and run a number of pilots when I came into this role, and I've been in this role about a year now. And we just initiated our second round of pilots, which I'm very excited about, taking their small team along with my small team and a small group from our agency to help run this second round. And we're kicking off another round of pilots across 5 different business terrains that we had identified. And through this effort, we spoke with over 70 of the top global VCs, which led us to over 250 startups that we then ran through and audited to whittle down to roughly 20 different specific startup partners who we brought in for a virtual immersion day. And in typical times, this would be an in-person session, but really went off amazingly well virtually. And we've now narrowed down that initial list of 20. We had hoped to find maybe 5 to 7. We're now looking at 8 to 10 roughly pilots because there was so much excitement about some of the partners that we met with. And we're hoping to kick off those pilots over the next, hopefully most by end of Q4 into early Q1.
Is personalization at scale one of the things that you really use to guide your search for these things? Because it seems to me that a lot of what you're talking about when it comes to personalization at scale and using digital and targeting and merging with data is really a very, very digitally driven, personalized goal.
So we did brief the partner when we initially reached out to the VCs. We did brief them and said that personalization at scale was a pillar that we were focused on, or a terrain that we were focused on. That was in addition to things like gaming as a specific terrain, or sports marketing as a specific terrain, or competitive intelligence. And so we did get a number of different partners that came back, and I would say the lion's share of those 20 that we did meet with over that immersion day, or a few immersion days, were in the personalization at scale base. And I think a lot of that is just driven because there is such a huge interest and need for us to build those capabilities internally at PepsiCo.
What are some of the most promising models that you've been testing now for ways of particularly integrating brand messaging into other forms of media?
Yeah, so something that that I know we briefly touched on and that we're a bit bullish and excited about right now is preparing ourselves for what we're referring to as like, what's that ad-free world in the future? We know that consumers are actively avoiding traditional commercials, whether it's through ad blockers or DVR skipping and things like that. And so we know it's imperative for us to find a non-intrusive way to deliver our brands and messaging to consumers in a way that they can't avoid or miss it, and that actually brings more to the content. And so we've been working with a few efforts in the post-production product placement space, where we can feature our products, signage, or even videos into content that we know the consumers are already actively engaged in, and deliver them our message or our brands in a way that feels really authentic, but not intrusive and doesn't annoy the consumer. We know that traditional product placements are fantastic, but they have really long lead times. And once locked in, it's really difficult to make any changes because that content is locked. And so you can't adjust the message or the logo, or if you have updates to your visual ID, there's challenges there. But so we've found some partners, like one we did with a company called Myriad, and we worked where we were able to insert our product, signage, and video into content that's already been produced. It's even better when, as they're building out their content slate, there's the future opportunities where we can leverage our CDNA audience data to really marry that with who's viewing theirs, and dynamically insert a variety of products from our portfolio in real time based on who's watching it and what's going on to resonate with them most. So Steve, you could be watching the same show I'm watching, and you could see a Pepsi can in your content, and I could see a bubbly can in mine, or you could see a Doritos bag of chips and I could see a Lay's. And I think that the opportunities are really exciting about how quickly we're seeing this space evolve and explode. And there are a number of partners in this space now that we're having conversations with because we think it's a really great, amazing opportunity for us to leverage our data in the future.
And I know we have a clip of this. It's really interesting, this stuff. And as you said, this is dynamic. This can be dynamically and personally targeted. So different languages, different creative, different brands could be inserted post-production into video clip. And I want to show a piece of this. And then on the other side, we'll talk about what we just saw and what's possible here. Let me cue Ryan up to show us the clip. So that's pretty remarkable when you realize that stuff can simply be inserted on the fly. In fact, it reminds me of a bit of a technology that I remember over a decade ago that was first deployed in gaming and in dynamic ad insertion in gaming networks, where you'd actually see billboards and things being inserted on the fly into gaming. But tell us a little bit about the potential that you see here.
Yeah. And I think, it is, when you see the clip, it really brings to life how seamless that this technology can work. And you really could never believe that it wasn't there in the first place. And I think that fact really just, it's pretty substantial. And I think to your point about gaming, we're still doing things like that with another company called Anzu, and we're doing dynamically inserted games or ads within the gaming sense, which again, similar to traditional content integration, it has long lead times. You don't want to lock in product. This affords you the opportunity to do that more dynamically, to have update capabilities to update throughout. And we're seeing great results here. So I think, this was a small effort that we did with Univision, with Myriad, and we're not large enough to be able to see true sales impact, but we did measure brand attributes through Kantar and NCS, and saw significant lifts to brand favorability, ad awareness, and purchase intent. And when we looked at soda consumers, we saw a significant increase in consumption amongst those exposed to our integrations. And so, I think this is a huge opportunity for us, where we recognize it's not, we're preparing ourselves for this ad-free world, but it's also a new dimension of how we consider looking at types of advertising. And it also gives an opportunity to break into channels like the Netflixes and the Disney Pluses and the spaces that we're prohibited from traditional advertising at this point, but can truly make an impact and make a change. And we're excited to see what innovations happen in the future, because like I said, there are new partners coming out in this space. The technology is so rapidly expanding and innovating. I think that the opportunities could be really, really interesting as we continue to stay on the pulse. And that's why we're hoping that from a PepsiCo perspective, we're building those capabilities within our marketing organization, that they understand it, they know how to work it, so that once those are there, we're ready to hit the ground running.
Let me remind everybody that if you have any questions of Kate, please raise your hand and Lisa will get to you and bring you forward. Let me ask a wrap question. Is this advertising of a very different sort? Does it aim towards different metrics? Are you trying to address and talk to consumers in a different way through this kind of advertising? Is it complementing sort of those traditional pre-rolls and interstitials and all the stuff that we've been used to? Tell us a little bit about what kind of advertising this is and what needles you're trying to move that might be different.
Yeah, I think within this Pepsi example, it was really about driving top of mind awareness. We recognize that we've got a very, very high penetration and awareness. And so it's really just reminding our consumers that our product is there and it's delicious and refreshing and you want it. But I think that there's many opportunities, and we're just scratching the surface now. I think in this instance that you just saw, we did pair it with additional traditional ad units and measured the impact on those as well. But I think there will be opportunities for us too to see how we can leverage this technology for new brand launches, for continued just driving more reach and top of mind awareness. But I think we're still trying to figure out how this really fits into the mix. But we think that it should be a nice built-in.
Let me ask. Let's see if we have any questions. Let me ask Lisa to come in and see if we have any questions in the audience.
Hey, well, first of all, I have to say that was so cool. Seeing all of that, that was really amazing to see. And the question is, because you talked about how eventually you want to be able to go in with like a Netflix, and what's the process for someone, like, is it when Netflix already has the show and then it's going to come in that way, or do you have to pre-plan it? How does it work that way?
We've seen it work a few different ways, whether it's the producers coming in or if it's the suppliers coming in. Typically it ends up being on the production side. But what we're doing now is having a lot of conversations with our bigger network partners, because I think part of the biggest challenge that we've seen in this space to date is just lack of content that they have within their slates. And so as more of these partnerships come up, we're having more conversations with some of our bigger partners and saying, this is something that really interests us. We're trying to drive innovation in the tech space within advertising, and we think this could be a great solution. So let's network partner, let's learn on this together. Maybe you can find a way that we can test and learn and figure out the best ways to do it. To Steve, your point, like, we're still trying to figure out what is the best way to use this. Can we both be most effective with these types of innovations? So a lot of that is just a shared learning agenda on how we can really make the most impact out of everything we're doing.
And clearly you see this as a way of unlocking that that SVOD box, of getting brands into that airtime and that mind share that SVOD is taking.
Which has been a huge block for us to date. I mean, and especially as we've seen continued cord cutting, and we see that trend going to continue, there's going to be more limited chances for us to reach our consumers in those ways. So how do we find these new innovative ways to break into those spaces that are traditionally forbidden for us?
Do you see, and here's a good wrap question, have you seen any receptivity from those unnamed giants for this sort of thing? Are they interested? They consistently claim they don't want to put advertising in their streams. Are they interested in this though?
I know that we've talked to some of them, and they have been in conversations with some of these different partners. So I think that there are little fragments of opportunities of hope as we see things move forward and evolve. I think that this will be an area that we'll see continue to get larger.
Okay, well that ends on a hopeful note for advertising in the future. Kate Brady, thank you so much for joining us and giving us that little glimpse of the advertising world to come.
Great, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Kate.